The champ is here. 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 The champ is here.
It's your boy, V Ben Israel, the People's Champ, back with another YouTube live stream. We'll have a little serious talk tonight, y'all. We'll have a little more serious talk than we have been having for a while now. So I want y'all to strap in. Make sure you got your note-taking capabilities on hand. Like, subscribe, and share on your way in the door. Hit the Cash App, $ send to V. Send me $2, y'all. I need it to you. And we're going to talk seriously tonight, man. Because this is a topic it saddens my heart when I hear it, when I hear this phrase repeated. So we're gonna delve into it a little bit tonight. We're gonna delve into it. Where did all the men go? And more specifically, where did all the black men go? Because this is black content. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. And we got to be careful when we're having these conversations to stop intertwining white men and black men. And that's where the conversation goes off the rails. Two different groups of men, two different experiences. Not the same group. Okay? So we're going to talk about some things tonight. Allow me to introduce myself. Mucho gusto. I am the People's Champ, V Ben Israel. You can find me anywhere. We're on social media, V Ben Israel. I am simulcasting live here on YouTube, the People's Podcast, V Ben Israel. I'm simulcasting live on Facebook, V Speaks. And I believe I'm still going on Van Johnson Facebook as well. I'm not sure, but we'll share to that later on if not. But we're going to talk a little bit tonight. December 4th, 2024. Excuse me, not December. February 4th, December 20. Excuse me, I'm all tongue-tied. February 4th, 2020, 2020. 4. Put some emphasis on that shit. Tongue-tied a little bit tonight, y'all. Y'all know what I'm talking about. 24. And Black History Month. Right? So we're gonna talk some historical context this evening. Okay. We're gonna talk a little bit about that. And because too often, and I get on these panels or I get in discussions online, and the person that's speaking and saying these things doesn't have context. They don't understand. They're trying to apply modern context, what happened back in the 30s with what happened in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. And this is where they go off the rails. And they do it with modern definitions of words. Well, why didn't they just say it this way? Because that's not how people spoke back then. And they just can't understand it. But that goes to what I say. Y'all weren't good students when you were in school, which is why you don't understand this context now that you're an adult. And it's frustrating talking to y'all people who do this. Because it's like we can't move the conversation because we got to go back and teach y'all basic elementary and junior high school level stuff. You're not ready for the conversations that some of you are trying to engage in. And you should just shut your black mouths and listen and learn in silence. So maybe you can understand something. Instead of raising your hand, constantly talking, you're that annoying kid in the class who didn't do their homework. Everybody else who did their homework is shutting up and letting the teacher talk. But y'all was the annoying kids cracking jokes and always got something stupid to say. Before I get started, I'm going to check in with the comments. Of course, as always, Amanaz is in the house. She says, with her signature, "Hey, y'all." So y'all make sure y'all support Amanaz. She'll probably drop the link to her channel sometime during this stream. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share to her channel as well. And let us know when you come on in the door. Let us know where you're at, because we always can't see you. You know, sometimes StreamYard, the numbers be off. They say we got one person watching and it'd be 10 people watching. I mean, you can tell by the comments, So whatever. Just let us know you're here. Let us know you're here. But where did all the black men go? So how we got down this rabbit hole, let me give y'all a little background. I was over on a JVJ network. Young lady named Hashtag, or I believe that's what they call it, whatever. And somehow we got into the Monahan report. And her understanding or lack of understanding of what the Monahan report is about, and according to her, black men, it's the Bible for black men in the bad manosphere, and we use it as an excuse. First of all, the Monahan report was written by the federal government, had nothing to do with black men. What they were surprised about, they have been studying black life for decades. And they decided to commission this report, the Monahan report, in response to what black women were doing. And they were operating in a way that was different from other groups of women, all other groups of women. So groups of women coming out of the Great Recession have been given welfare and other kind of support. And once their men got back on track, those women got with their men and worked the shit out. And it was confused that why black women, once black unemployment dropped, so men are working, why aren't the black women partnering up with the men? They wanted to study this phenomenon. That's what the Monahan report is about. And oftentimes, people don't actually read or research the actual information. They'll look at some documentary by some feminist, or they'll read some article about the Monahan report written by some feminist, and they mistake that for what the actual report itself said. So this young lady, was her theory or her premise was that, or her understanding was that they were studying, the government was studying why women weren't getting back with their men, and it was because the men had abandoned them. That that well, if that was the case, that already answers the question, and there would have been no need to study the issue because the answer, well, why are black women staying on welfare? Because their men had abandoned them. That's the answer to the question. Wrong. That's not what the Monahan report was about. So this trope, like so many others, that black women push is always Jermaine's fault, right? That idea, that 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 trope has been around for decades. We're tired of hearing this shit.
I'm done with life, and it's all Jermaine's fault. It's always Jermaine's fault. I'm done. I'm done.
And the main ones that are pushing that idea, that trope, are younger generations of women. It wasn't the older generations who actually lived during those time periods saying this stuff. It's the granddaughters and great granddaughters misinterpreting history because when you listen, there are documentaries of those women of those time periods speaking for themselves at that time. None of those women were saying, oh, we're in this situation because our men abandoned us. Oh, we're in this situation because the men are deserting or they left. You won't find any documentary from those time periods of those women saying that. Only modern women, quote unquote, the granddaughters and great granddaughters. So if you look in the description, and I've given some reference to a couple of documentaries. Um, in the description is the Harvest of Shame, and I'm gonna talk more about that. That's in the description. That they were talking about what was happening in 1960 Black America. And then I went even further. I gave link to another documentary, the Memphis sanitation workers strike 1968. So we got 1960 and 1968 groups of women speaking for themselves about their men. And it was none of this men left us, they deserted us, they wasn't shit. The white man beat them down and they can't compete with the white man shit. That wasn't what those women were saying. Who actually lived during those times and was speaking at that time, and they spoke in present times. See, they have video footage, especially of the Memphis sanitation workers, wives, right? And you can find the full documentary on theroot.com, right? And you can Google it to find the links to those videos. Episode 6 is the wives, when the wives spoke from their own perspectives. Fascinating. Fascinating. How those women had admiration, appreciation for their husbands, even though their husbands were struggling to make a living and support the families. See, that's why I tell y'all these lies that was told where everybody, daddy, granddaddy had a business and everybody, granddaddy was making all of this money. That's anecdotal at best. Here the women are speaking for themselves. 1,300 sanitation workers went on strike. 1,300. These weren't unemployed men. These men were working for the city of Memphis. Which for black men would have been considered one of the better jobs to be able to work for the states in some capacity, right? 1968. I was born in 1976. I mean, so what are we talking about? 8 years before I was born? We're not talking about 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago. My mother was born in 1957. So what my mother would have been what in 68? 11? She would have been 11 years old at the time of the Memphis strike, right? Just to give y'all some context. We're not that far removed from this era as some of us would like to think we are, right? Memphis would have been considered an urban area. It wasn't rural. It would have been considered urban, right? Urban is different from inner city, by the way. Inner city is a term that comes later. So context matters. This is an urban area, meaning not rural. Okay. So even though you weren't in New York City, which is a city, or Chicago or some place like that, you had smaller cities in the South. Memphis, Wilmington, Charlotte, Jacksonville, Tampa, um, and there are others. I'm just throwing out a couple of names. So those places at that time, and hell, even today, aren't necessarily inner city, but it's urban, not rural. Take Charlotte for example. Even in 1960, Charlotte was an urban area, but you go an hour away to where my family was originated in York, South Carolina, just an hour away from Charlotte, or less, might be more like 45 minutes today, right? York, South Carolina to this day is rural South. It's rural. It's a very rural place. So being 45 minutes away in Charlotte was like being a lifetime away, a world away. Totally different in only a short distance, right? Even though quote unquote slavery, chattel slavery is over in 1865, the next 100 years where it was semi-slavery from 1865 to 1965, semi-slavery. Black folk weren't able to just pick up and move. They didn't have the means to get per se from York, South Carolina to Charlotte, North Carolina, 45 minutes away. They didn't have the means. They weren't free to move. We didn't have cars. It might have been one person in the whole community that had a car. And when that person rode, believe me, it was a bunch of people trying to ride with them. So they might not have been coming to Charlotte. Even if they were, you had to thumb a ride with that person. I mean, you know how even though if you had a buggy and carriage, you know how long it would take a buggy and carriage to get from York, South Carolina to Charlotte and back? And you had to have a reason for coming that distance, for crossing state lines. You had to have money. I think in one of the videos, it might have been the Harvest of Shame, and they were saying that the people, something like 200 days out of the year, they were doing this harvest from Florida to upstate New York. They followed the sun pretty much. So they went from harvest to harvest to harvest and picking the goods, the vegetables, the fruits. And different harvests happen at different times of year depending on where the region is. So Florida's harvest will begin at a certain time. And in Georgia and South Carolina and North Carolina was another time. And then they followed the highways going from state to state. There wasn't no interstates back then. So they particularly followed the old highway system, the US highways, 301. 301 runs from Florida all the way up into Ohio, for those of you who have never looked at a regular map. 301 come right up Florida, come right through South Carolina, North Carolina, and go on all the way up to Ohio. That was a major route. And you also had to be careful when you were traveling. Black people couldn't travel certain places. So I don't know if any of you have seen that, the Green Book. That movie covered that. When the guy was traveling, he was a musician, and he was traveling from New York down south, down to Florida to perform. And he had the Green Book, which roads to take, which hotels were Negro friendly, those kind of things. And that guy who was in the character in that movie, he didn't understand it because he had never been south before. He grew up in New York. He didn't understand the Chitlin circuit, right? What was that? Because it was dangerous, no matter what prestige of black man you may have been, how much money you may have had. It was dangerous for you to travel outside of your main community. Just because you was a black man. It was dangerous. So when I hear this young lady and other young ladies talking about the man deserted the women, no. Black men, you got to understand the context of what happened to black men after slavery. The South's economy was destroyed. So what was the response to that? The black laws or black codes, they started creating all of these vagrancy laws and any kind of bullshit law that they could put in place to lock black men up, put them on the chain gang, put them back on the farm they just got freed from. Because that was the Southern economy. So a lot of black men lost their freedom in their lives. They didn't abandon their families. They got taken from their families, put in prison. And they had no way of communicating with their families. There was no phone at the house in the 1920s. You didn't have a phone number to your house. A lot of y'all don't understand this concept. If you were lucky, you had access to a party line, as they called it. And somebody would be able to get word to your wife or something. If you were lucky, But most of that was up north. That wasn't in the South. Well, why didn't they write a letter? Most of these men didn't read and write. They had a third, fourth grade education if they were lucky. And you see the kids in these documentaries. Uh, the woman that was picking the beans in the Harvest Institute in the beginning. She was 29 years old with 14 kids. And the white man asked her, "Who watches your kids?" They watch themselves. And it was like an 8-year-old boy. They interviewed him. He was responsible for taking care of the other kids while mama was out there picking beans. 8 years old, taking care of all of them younger kids below him. Just do the math. He was the oldest at 8. So when he was 8, there was at least 7 other kids behind him. 8 years old. He had to feed them lunch. He had to cook for them and take care of them in all kind of ways. He did that little boy didn't have the opportunity to go to school. And then when he got older, and I'm sure a very short period after that, when some of the other kids got older and could take care of the kids, he had to take his butt out there to field with his mama. That was normal life. So these men, when they grew up, they didn't read and write. Now they thrown in jail because they standing around looking for work. Vagrancy. You ain't got no ID. Well, they didn't issue ID back then. And it didn't affect the white man because the white man wasn't being questioned about his ID. But a black man was. And you didn't have no identification, or you may have had some papers. They would tear your papers up, throw them in your face, and put you on the paddy wagon and take your ass to prison. And don't be too far away from your normal community where nobody knows you. 45 minutes away, right? That was like traveling to another country. Again, going from York, South Carolina to just Charlotte was like going to another country. Again, y'all young women don't have this young people. I'm not just gonna put it on the women. You young people don't understand what men had to go through. And the reason why men wanted to keep their women at home in their home communities, because it was safe for you. It was safe. Black women would get put in prison too, or worse. But it wasn't as common for a black woman to go to a female prison. But they had those too. Who do you think was making the prison uniforms? They had to have women who could sew. So they would lock black women up to make the uniforms for the male prisons. They didn't need as many black women because the most of the work was agricultural. It was hard labor, digging ditches, digging roads, putting rocks on roads by hand. It was a lot of agriculture during this 100 years after slavery. You got to put things in context. So where did the men go? They went looking for work. They got locked up, put in prison. They got murdered. A lot of men just got killed. That happens today. 1 million black men disappear from the United States every year. They're not in prison and they ain't in nobody's morgue. They just vanish. Today, 2024. So what the fuck do you think was happening in 1930, 1940? What did you think was happening in rural America? Hell, here in Charlotte, South Charlotte, they were building Top Golf right off of 45 Arrowwood Road. And that construction got delayed for about 2 years. Because when they started digging up that area, they found an old grave site of unmarked graves. Where you think those where you think who you think those bodies was? White people? Those were black men that they were digging up. Most of y'all didn't even see that. That wasn't that long ago. That was a few years ago. But then you take your happy ass, you want to go on a date to Top. No, I remember this girl asked me to take her to Top Golf. She ain't into sports. She don't play golf. The fuck am I taking you to Top Golf for? For what? I was working for CPI Security, and my office was right across the highway from that location. I would actually get off at Arrowwood exit and go the opposite way to my office. And so I know that area very well. But that was a rural area until recent years when they built 485. 485 was slave land. It was a plantation 100 years ago. What highway came even close to that part of Charlotte? US 49. Where does that US 49 go? In the Rock Hill, New York. And eventually down into to Florida. See, I had a grandfather who thought it was fun to make us study the maps. We didn't have GPS. So we had to sit on the floor and he would test us on knowing certain highways. And my grandfather had all this shit memorized. He was like a human GPS. He knew that shit well. He knew it well. Hold on, let me check the comments. Albanaz says Top Golf is my spot. Of course it is, because you a sports chick. This was Quetta, by the way. Albanaz knows who Quetta is. But Quetta ain't no sports girl. Me and you, I would go to Top Golf with you all day long because we would get a couple of beers, watch whatever game is playing, and have a good time. But I ain't going there with Quetta. For what? Unreal. Unreal. Oh my. I'm not gonna get off. I ain't gonna chase that rabbit hole, but it was a stupid ass conversation. I remember having that shit with her, and where she even got the idea from somebody who didn't even live in Charlotte, wasn't even that familiar with Charlotte, is gonna tell her about a spot that's 5 minutes from where my office was, where I worked at. Her brother seemed to know more about this location than I did, and I worked around the corner from it. Unfucking believable. Even though neither one of them been there before. I had been there. My company, we had did a couple of functions there, one thing about CPI security is they had nice events for their employees. They always fed us well, and they always took us to nice places. You know, the owner and his wife, they were very conscious of that. They were very nice people. Um, and I remember when I got sick, before I had my stroke, right before I had my stroke, I had got sick. And and then when I was in the hospital, the wife of the owner had sent me a flower basket. And then I had saw her when I got out the hospital. I had bumped into her. We had a function. We had a function at the ballpark. They had rented out the whole ballpark, and we had like a little brunch down there or whatever. And the wife came up to me and she says, "Oh, you're looking well. Did you get my flowers?" I'm like, "You sent the flowers?" She says, "Yeah, I had heard you got sick at the job, and I wanted you to know that we was thinking about you." She's like, "Yeah, I sent the flowers myself. You was a Presbyterian, right?" I was like, "Wow, you." She's like, "Yeah, I ain't got no secretary. My husband got a secretary, but I ain't got one." She's like, "I sent the flowers to your room." And she was like, "Yeah, you was in the cardiovascular wing of Presbyterian Hospital." I said, "Yes, ma'am, I was." She's like, "Yeah, that's serious." So those are good people I work for. The fact that she remembered that, um, I mean, I had the stroke right before, right, right after my birthday when I turned 40. Um, so you figure in, I guess it would have been October when we had that function, because we had two functions around the same time. We had a function at the Panthers Stadium for a game, so it was football season. But before that, we had the function at the ballpark. Um, yeah. So a couple of months that went by, she remembered all that shit from memory. She's like, "Yeah." She's like, "Luckily, your name is a non-traditional name, so I was able, when I called them, I didn't have to give them much information other than your name to find out what room you were in." I was like, "Okay, okay, yeah, nice lady, nice people." And I mean, she stayed and talked to me. We had a whole conversation for about 10 minutes. It wasn't like she was brushing me off like 2 minutes. "Yeah, you get the flowers. I buy." She stood and talked to me, pulled me to the side, had a whole conversation with me for about 10, 15 minutes. We talked, and very nice lady. Very nice lady. That's all I could say. And I've run into people like that throughout my career. I remember when I worked for McDonald's, I worked for a private owner down in Orangeburg, and D-Wall was my area supervisor at that time, and his wife was always very friendly to me. I used to make her custom salads, and she didn't want nobody else to make her salad but me. So I had missed a little bit of work because of a situation, and she noticed she had came by a couple of times and couldn't get her salad. Like, wait a minute, where the hell is he at? And then she started investigating, like, "Oh, no, 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 no. I want his ass back to work tomorrow." And she made that shit happen. She made that shit happen. When the NAACP failed, D Wall, Mrs. D Wall, got that shit together. One phone call to her husband. "You get his ass back to work." So I've met very good people over the course of my life who have treated me very well, and that's that rabbit hole. I'm gonna go back to it, but it saddens me to hear modern women, and Kevin talked about this. Y'all have such a low level of contempt for black men. And it shows. And here we are looking at these documentaries of your grandmothers and great grandmothers. Those women didn't have that. They appreciated what their men were doing, how little money they were bringing in. They still appreciated those men. They stood by those men. They cooperated with those men. They wanted to ensure those men had whatever little bit of peace they could give them or maintain for them. Go look at the documentaries. You hear it in their own words, even when they talk about it in modern times. The lady said, "Well, that was my husband. That's still my man, even though he's dead." She's still saying it. That was my man. That's my man. Feminine lady, not ratchet, not bitter. See, all this bitter shit came from younger generations of women, the baby boomers, older generation X women. Y'all got the bitterness, even though y'all didn't go through none of them struggles that these women went through. They speaking for themselves. These men wasn't making no astronomical amount of money. They were barely making a living wage. That's why they went on strike. That was the number one thing on their lists for the strike, to get paid a living wage. And I started to say earlier, even when you look at the harvest of shame, those men and women were going out to work 200 days out of the year and working in all kind of deplorable conditions. And they were making something at the most $900 a year. And the narrator says that would be equivalent of $6,700 today. Can you imagine? Let's bump it up a little bit to 10,000. Trying to survive, not only take care of yourself, but take care of a family on $10,000. That's mind-boggling. Think about what I'm saying. I mean, $20, $20,000 a year is $10 an hour. $10,000 a year would be $5 an hour. Minimum wage just starting to change. In many states, it's still 725. And hell, 725 came about in the late 90s and early 2000s. Before that, it was 425. When I started working, minimum wage is 385 in the 90s. So I remember that in my lifetime. So all of this bullshit, all y'all got these Cosby Kid stories. Y'all grew up in the black bourgeoisie. Is bullshit, especially if you're from the South. Did that happen? Sure. There are anecdotal situations. Typically, those were people who grew up in the North. But if you grew up in Memphis, Tampa, anywhere in the South, $1,000 a year, you made just enough money to try to make it day to day and week to week. And the women, listen to the women talk. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. Go listen to the women talk out of their own mouths. Listen how they speak about their husbands. I tell you to Google it. The root um, the Memphis sanitation workers strike. It'll take you to the Roots website. Look for episode 6, the wives' perspective. Maybe I'll go back and put it in the description, that particular one. That documentary was made in 2018, by the way. So we talk about recent. We ain't talking about no old shit. These women are still alive. But this idea, it is so non-logical that large groups of black men abandoned and deserted their wives and kids. So let's explore that for a minute, right? If that happened, they were living here in this place and they decided to desert their families and abandon their kids, where did these men go? They would that their population numbers would have to show up somewhere else. So, for example, if a large group of black men left York, South Carolina, a large group, and how far could they have gotten? Rock Hill, Charlotte? The numbers in Charlotte would show there's an influx of single black men, and we would be able to see that in the census reports. That didn't happen. In most cases, when men left, and I know of 2 such men who left, well, I know a few who left York, South Carolina. My grandfather was one. After he came home from Vietnam, well, Korea, excuse me. When he came home from Korea, Korea was before Vietnam. So when he came home from Korea, he took him and my grandmother migrated. They were part of the Great Migration to the north. I remember asking, some of his brothers did the same thing, and there were other men, some of his sisters did the same thing. And I remember talking, because I was raised by these people. How did you get to New York? How did you get to New Jersey? Oh, there was a lady from back home who lived up there who got a boarding house, and she sent for us or sent word back home. Anybody from back home that wanted to come work, she had a house for them. So when they got up there, however they got up there, they bought a bus ticket, they hitched a ride, my grandmother, my grandfather. However they got up there, they found that lady. She put them in a room. She sent them down to the factory because at the same time as blacks migrated into the inner cities, which were all white originally, Newark, uh, New York, Philadelphia, Camden, Trenton, Chicago, Indiana, right? These places, right? Factory towns. The white people moved out. Do some research on white flight. So the more black people moved in, the more white people moved further out. So there was opportunity there. My grandparents moved to Newark. They lived in a project in Newark, which was originally designed for white people, like they were. The white folks moved out. The black folks was moving in. They got a job at whatever factory or wherever they can get. Airports, train yards, bus stations, wherever they could get. My aunt, my uncle, they worked for LaGuardia for 30 years. They met in 1972. R.I.P. to my Aunt Jean. I just had this conversation with her a year before she died. She died last summer. So the summer before, I sat at her kitchen table in York, South Carolina, and asked her, how did you and Uncle John get to Queens, New York? How? She told me. Guess who was also from York, South Carolina? My Uncle John. But my Uncle John and my Aunt Jean didn't meet in South Carolina. She met Uncle John in New Jersey, who was living in New Jersey. Her sister, my grandmother Pearl, and my grandfather Thomas. So I'm sure Thomas and Uncle John had bumped into each other. Hey, where you from? Oh, you're from York too? Well, who are your people? Oh, I know the Rollinsons. Yeah, I know them. So they became friends. And after a while, it was, hey, my wife got a pretty young foxy sister. And my Aunt Jean, even on her deathbed, the preacher was talking about how fine my aunt was. She had always been fine. Little red bone. Sassy. So Thomas introduced John to Pearl's little sister, Jean. It didn't take them 5 years to figure it out. He took one look at my aunt and stayed with her for 50 fucking years. Hello. They got together. They got a job out there in Queens and LaGuardia. They bought a house in Queens and raised their two sons, John Wayne Jr. and Anthony, my cousin Tony, my big cousin Tony. All right? They did that for 50 years. My Uncle John, to this day, is the only man I've ever heard of who retired from two jobs at the same time. He didn't just have one job. He worked two jobs for 30 fucking years. Hello. Talk to me. Two jobs. One was LaGuardia, and the other one was I know he was a corrections officer. He did both of those things. 30 years. He retired. He got pensions from two jobs. So when people tell me black men that love their wives and abandon their families, you shitting on my forefathers, my history. I know my Uncle John. I saw him. I spent about an hour talking with him after the funeral. And one of the things that amazed me most about that conversation, he wasn't sad. He had a look of fulfillment on his face, of gratitude, like he was lucky to have spent 50 years with that woman. That was the look on his face, like I did it. I made it, Lord. He wasn't sad at all. Now, my cousins were sad. They just lost their mama. My Aunt Jean was my favorite aunt from my grandmother's group. And it was actually my mother's favorite aunt, too. My mother loved my Aunt Jean. I spent summers out there in York. I know my Aunt Jean and my Uncle John very well. You know, I knew these people. 1972, that's how I know that year, because she had just told me the story when they had met. That was the courting process, by the way. That was the remnants of it. My grandfather provided the coverage for his sister-in-law. Way the hell up there in New Jersey. They was from down here. My aunt wasn't from York. She was from Ruby, South Carolina. She was a real country girl. That's where my grandmother was from. Ruby and York are about an hour apart on Highway 9. See, everything follows. I keep mentioning the U.S. highways because they were integral of how we got to know each other, how we moved. There were no interstates back then. They weren't built yet. So everything was always Highway 9 runs South Carolina. If you're looking at North Carolina and South Carolina on the map, that line, that imaginary line that separates the two states, Highway 9 pretty much runs parallel with it. It goes from the beach to the mountains. That's what Highway 9 is. Highway 9, traveling west, will eventually take you to Highway 5 and 21. And 521 runs into York and Rock Hill the other way through Lancaster, right? Crosses what is now known as 77, right? That area. Y'all don't know history. You haven't, you're ignorant of it. And you're ignorant of it because you've never taken the time to learn it, to investigate it, to seriously do some instruction or seek instruction or investigation into it. You didn't even talk to the old people, most of you. I was surrounded by them, so I had no choice but to talk to them. And I was always a curious kid, so I wanted to know stuff. And we spent summers, we would come down here from New Jersey. So even though I'm a city boy, I spent lots of summers down here in Charlotte, in Rock Hill, in York, in Clover, in Chesterfield, in Ruby, in Mount Croghan, in Pageland. Hell, I've seen some pictures of myself I didn't even know existed. My cousin showed me, my cousin Kelton, he's a little bit older than me, showed me a picture of me and him playing together when we was kids down in York. I said, shit, I never seen this picture. And I didn't realize I had been traveling that far so so long ago. It was just normal to me. So going from New Jersey to South Carolina at that age, I didn't have a concept of the time it took to drive that distance. I just know I was going to see my cousin Kelton, and I was going to spend a couple of days with him. Hell, I didn't realize that couple of days was really a whole month for the whole summer. I didn't realize it. Time didn't mean the same thing then as it does now. Fascinating. But even talking to my Aunt Jean 2 years ago in her house and listening to the stories of how her and my Uncle John gentrified that neighborhood in Queens. Queens, for a lot of you who don't understand, is a borough in New York City. But it's more like suburbs. It's not Harlem. It ain't Brooklyn like you see on TV. It's more like what Charlotte is today. You in a neighborhood with houses. People had a backyard. They did cookouts. That's what Queens looks like. So the East Orange. Well, my grandparents saved up enough money and got out of the projects. And those projects don't even exist anymore today. They tore them down. But right there on Bergen Street, by what is now they call that University Heights, NJIT there, New Jersey Institute of Technology, is right there on Bergen. That used to be the projects. Bergen Street. Yeah. Shout out to my Jersey folks. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Bergen Street, south runs between the Weekway section of Newark and Central Avenue. Bergen Street is the cutover. You got Bergen Street, it crosses over South Orange Ave, crosses over Avon. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Shout out to my Jersey folks. Hell, I remember not too long ago, I was at there's an IHOP on Bergen, and I would go there, and I was eating there, and I looked out the window, and I saw something fascinating. White lady walking the dogs, another white lady jogging. I'm like, what the fuck? This is one of the most dangerous cities or in most dangerous streets in the world. This is the equivalent of being on the south side of Chicago, Bergen Street was. And there's white ladies out here driving. I mean, walking dogs and driving bicycles and shit. What the fuck? The way the the guy, the bus boy, heard, he heard me say it to myself, what the fuck? And he's like, yo, you must not have been here in a while, man. I'm like, no, I'm down south now. He like, yo, a lot of things is changing, kid. He's like, this area, what they call it now, right? I said, no, I didn't know they called it anything. It's Bergen Street. He said, nah, they call it University Heights now. I said, what? They gentrified it, pushed all the black folk out, tore down the projects, built condos. I said, are you shitting me? I mean, we talk about a part of Newark. It ain't safe to walk in if you ain't from down there. White women decide they want some shit, they take that shit. Believe that shit. They when they plant their flag, they ensign, when they plant that shit, that's a Starbucks. So if they plant a Starbucks, that shit is theirs. They are coming in full force after that. Don't let them put no Starbucks somewhere that used to be traditionally black. They did that shit over here in Charlotte. It just ain't no Starbucks yet on Freedom Drive. But it's coming. Freedom Drive in the next 5 years is going to be lily whites. They're building a whole lot of shit. I've been saying it. Starbucks is coming, baby. Baby, baby. Freedom Drive. Hell, Camp Green is gone. Anybody know anything about Charlotte? Camp Green was a little rough area. All over Freedom Drive, them little neighborhoods. All right? Tuckasegee, them little neighborhoods that were Avalon or whatever. All them little neighborhoods. They gentrifying the fuck out of them. All they got to do is plant that flag. Plant the flag. North Tryon is coming. I give North Tryon about 10 years. North Tryon is where we live now. Hidden Valley is coming. It ain't quite there yet because they just finished this train. But now they building up all of these apartments and condos. And they pricing ninjas out. And the property values are starting to go up. And these ninjas, these baby boomers who got the houses from the old folks, they giving these houses away. They giving that equity, that sweat equity, that grandma and grandpa and daddy and them, your older daddy is paid for. See, because Big Mama's house wasn't Big Mama's house in the beginning. Big Mama's house was Big Daddy's house. Big Daddy died early when he got sick and left the house to Big Mama or left the house to his daughter. See, black women, their home ownership increased in recent years for black women. And black women wrote all them articles that, oh, black women buying houses. No, they're not. The number one way that black women in acquired housing in recent years is not because they purchased it. It was through death benefits or divorce. So daddy and mama left from the house. Grandma left from the house. Granddad left from the house. That's the common way. And unfortunately, these baby boomers, they took that equity that grandma and grandpa and them had, and they fucked it up because they wanted to front and fake like they had money, and they didn't. So they took that equity out of the house and bought a car, and the car ain't worth shit now. Or they went on a trip or whatever. They was fronting. And unfortunately, that's where we are right now. And a lot of people haven't yet discovered how bad their mamas fucked it up and their aunties fucked it up. And you're going to be left with the bill. That's coming now. That's in theaters right now. Mm-hmm. Yep. Black men have never gone anywhere except to the grave or prison. Right? More of us went to we died. So you watch the video link, the YouTube video Harvest of Shame. And they even make mention of 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 those migrants, not immigrants. Don't confuse the words. Migrants at this time on the East Coast weren't Mexicans. They were poor blacks and poor whites, right? And they were going from Florida to upstate New York and sometimes further to do the harvest. Now on the West Coast, you had Mexicans on the West Coast. But we're not talking about the West Coast. We're talking about the East Coast. The harvest of shame. And one of the ways people would die, it'd be a bus accident or a truck accident because there were no safety laws. They would just pile everybody on the back of a truck with a canvas top. Truck have an accident, somebody flip over, they just die. And they bury them wherever they at. They didn't know, again, there ain't no phone number to call their family. Most of these people couldn't read and write. So the wife is back home. The husband is out trying to make this money and he gets killed. The wife never sees him again. He didn't desert his family like the young lady hashtag was trying to make it seem. Well, if they was going to break up, they should have just broke up because that wasn't what was happening. Black men, even today, don't leave their families and wives in large numbers. The majority of divorces, the vast majority, 80% of divorces are filed by black women. That's what the numbers say. That's what they've always said. The man goes off to war, gets killed. He goes to migrate looking for work, doing the agriculture shit, gets killed on somebody's farm or on a truck. They have no way of notifying you. Again, you're still today. In modern technology, a million black men disappear. They don't know where they are. So can you imagine what was happening in 1960? No, most of y'all have no concept. We ain't talking about 1800s. 1960, my mother's lifetime. Hmm. I'm trying to give y'all some context. 1960. And and the white man tells you with the government, that was a common occurrence. Not to mention when they were, they didn't have hotels. Sometimes these people had to sleep out on the field, underneath a tree, in a tent. If they were lucky, some kind of makeshift place for them to stay on the hay beds. There were no laws to protect these people. And they were getting paid below living wage. And the people who are arranging these companies, as they called them, they were slave laborers. It was modern day slavery because they charge them for the bus ride. They charge them if they had a bedroom, so to speak, somewhere, a whole family in one bedroom, and they charge them $15 a week or whatever. And they would say these people when they got back to Florida, they had just enough money to make it the next day. Why did they do it? Because that was survival. They couldn't save up long term money. The white folk and the black folk both saying the same thing. We just trying to make it to the next day. Now, if there was something better, they would have did it. But there was no employment in the South. Remember, the South's economy had been destroyed after the Civil War. So either prison, that's where the early stages of the prison industrial complex formed. But I never hear y'all black women mentioning that. It ain't never the man got put in jail. He got put on a chain gang. It's he deserted his family and went somewhere. How did he do that? He had no means of transportation. He had no paperwork. He had no skills. He couldn't read and write. So where did he go? Army. He went in one of these harvest companies. I mean, there was limited opportunities. Another good documentary to white watch is about Mississippi, Leland, Mississippi, same era, 1960s. Strike City in Leland, Mississippi. Very fascinating. Very fascinating. Hell, Mississippi, they were surprised. They would give the black kids scholarships to go to schools in other states because they didn't want the black kids going to school in Mississippi. And then the black people would come back home and they had all of these prestigious degrees from the University of Ohio, University of Chicago, and they like, wait a minute, how these people get all these degrees? And they go, damn state of Mississippi, because they were so anti or they were so pro segregation to entice black people not to desegregate Mississippi, send them out of state to somewhere else is what they was doing. Strike City, Mississippi, Leland, Mississippi. There's tons of these documentaries. Ain't none of the women talking about the man abandoned us. None of them. So I done gave you Memphis. I just gave you Leland, Mississippi. Hell, Wilmington, North Carolina, Charlotte. My family, all of my uncles was married. It was 13 of them. The majority of them still live in York today. So where's this example of all of these men who abandoned their families? My grandmother had brothers. In fact, her brothers are the ones who never left. My Uncle Jack and my Uncle Nelford never left the Pageland area. Whereas my Aunt Jean and my grandmother, they wound up in New Jersey and New York. Their older sister, Elnora, wound up in Virginia, in Newport. So the women left, but the men didn't leave. They to the day they died. They were in their hometown. So it's a lie when you say men abandon their families. Before them, my grandfather Roland bought the land that's still in my family to this day. He bought that land in 1920, 16 acres, still in my family. That sound like a man who was abandoning his family? No, he created a legacy for his family. I lived on that land. I went to school there. My kids lived on that land and went to school there. Y'all just don't know what you're talking about. And you just talk because you want to push this narrative that black men ain't shit. And it's always Jermaine's fault. Some kind of way. What about when Jermaine do good shit? How come we don't ever hear about that? 1920, black women couldn't buy their own land. They could inherit land, but they couldn't buy their own land. So where did the land come from if the men wasn't there to do it? Y'all need to stop with that.
I'm done with life, and it's all Jermaine's fault. It's always Jermaine's fault. I'm done. I'm done.
Y'all need to stop with that narrative because it just ain't true. And the more data that comes out, the more y'all look like liars. All of the data shows the opposite of the narratives that y'all been pushing all my life. Black men abandon their kids. And y'all use that today as an excuse. The Pookies and Ray Rays that y'all deal with, you were never in a relationship with them. You were doing hookup culture. So they weren't with you to begin with for you to even be abandoned. It was just some dude you were fucking. Now you got kids because of your reckless choice having sex while you're ovulating in modern day. That's your choice. And now Pookie is supposed to all of a sudden be in a relationship with you because you spit out a baby. No, that's not the way it works. Pookie was never with you. He would come through, smash you, and leave. That's all y'all relationship was. He was there long enough to fuck you. You ain't go on no dates. You ain't never lived together. Y'all didn't see each other on a daily basis. Normal relationship shit. You were just fucking Pookie. It's time to tell the truth. Now you spit out a baby, and now you want to say, oh, he a deadbeat. Yeah, right. And a lot of y'all are college educated. And y'all still do this shit with y'all smart asses. Because y'all like Pookie. Y'all like fucking Pookie. Especially you college educated women, you teachers. Y'all some of the nastiest, freakiest bitches I ever met. I'm telling the truth about it. Y'all church girls and y'all upstanding so-called women, y'all AKAs and all of that bullshit. Y'all some of the most nastiest, freakiest women I've ever met in my life. You be preaching on the pulpit on the Sunday at 12 o'clock, and by 2 o'clock you home getting fucked in your ass by some dude who ain't your husband. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. And then later that night, you got another dick in your mouth from a different man. Tell the fucking truth. Then Monday morning, you back at the school teaching. Tell the fucking truth. But I'm wrong. You're going to get mad at me for saying it. I'm wrong for saying it. Ain't going to be mad at me. Ain't that funny? It's all me. No, V, you lying. My mama ain't like that. My teacher ain't like that. Okay. 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 So I guess I'm defaming somebody. Somebody take me to court. I'm itching to show the videos. I'm itching to show them. So please sue me. Take me to court. Take V-Bet Israel to court. I dare you. Anybody. If I'm defaming you. Hell, if anything, the way I'm saying it right now is the nice way. I'm saying it the nice way. So take me to court. Tell me I'm lying. Well, and that's a good segue to end this stream. We may have to revisit this some more. I was hoping I'd have more traffic, but it is late on a Sunday night. And everybody get ready for the work week. And I wish y'all well this week. And remember what I told y'all at the end of the week. You got to reward yourself because y'all are your own star players. So you need to be thinking about that. You got all week, Monday through Friday. And I remind y'all again on Friday, you got to find a way to reward yourself. Take yourself out. I want everybody to take yourself out to a nice lunch, excuse me, or dinner Friday. All right. Friday or Saturday. That's going to be your reward for making it through this week. Right. I want us to get in the habit of doing that. Taking care of your star player. And it may not be a lunch. Lunch is easy. Lunch is easy. Hell, it's $13.99 at Golden Corral. $11.99 at Golden Corral. Get you a nice little lunch, salad, whatever, during lunch. Whatever you decide to do, go get your toes done. Go get an extra haircut this week, fellas. Whatever you're gonna do, just do it. And I want y'all to hit me up and let me know how you took care of your star player. I'm gonna do a stream on that later this week. I may remind y'all on Hump Day, but we'll see. But remember, I am your host, Mucho Star. I am your host, the Ben Israel, the People's Champ. And I'm here for the people, man. I'm gonna tell y'all the things that you need to hear that other people won't tell you. That's what I'm here for. Ain't nobody called me a liar yet, and I've been doing this a decade and a half on social media or more. Ain't nobody called me a liar yet. So stay tuned. Remember, on your way out, hit that like button. Y'all slacking on my likes. My views and my likes ain't lining up. Take a second to hit the damn like button. That's all I'm asking y'all for. Well, I am asking y'all to send me $1 so I can get it to you. But other than that dollar and that like, at least one or the other. I'd rather have the likes. Because it's the quickest thing. It takes 10 seconds to hit the like button on YouTube. Hit the like button, smash the bell, and stay tuned, man. We'll be more coming at you. Holla at your boy.
You're all a bunch of fucking assholes. You know why? You don't have the guts to be what you want to be. You need people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy. So, what I make you? Good? You're not good. You just know how to hide, how to lie. Me, I don't have that problem. Me, I always tell the truth, even when I lie. So say good night to the bad guy.